Nostalgia, a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. Many times, we find ourselves as grown adults going through the hardships and complications of life, always glorifying and chasing after the times of old. Many of us who are still gamers today often go back and play the games we grew up with, just to realize that our childhood game heroes are really just flaming hot pieces of steaming dog. But that's not always true. And in the case of Custom Robo, well, let me paint a picture for you. The year is 2004, Martha Stewart's in prison, Janet Jackson flashed everybody at the Super Bowl, and Mark the Robot Zuckerberg created Facebook. What a legendary year it was. Your mom is dragging you around the mall for what feels like hours on end, and you pass by that black and red sign with the two magic words, GameStop. You just got a GameCube for Christmas that year, and beg your mom, "Please, Mom, please, can you buy me the new Mario Party 6? I'll do anything. I'll even..." Alright, I can't keep up that voice any longer. But the game is so expensive. I mean, $50? Really? In 2004? It seems like video games are the only thing that inflation hasn't completely ruined yet. So instead, you scrounge through the old sale carts where they used to just dump hundreds of games that nobody wanted to play, and you land your eyes on this. Custom Robo Battle Revolution. Because what was cooler in the early 2000s than robot duels to the death? You take it home, run to your room, pop in the disc, and experience a childhood memory that will forever, more than likely, lay dormant until somehow you stumbled across this video. Yeah. But, before I get ahead of myself, I think we need to add a little context first. 5 years prior, in 1999, Nintendo had a new game console in the works. It would be announced at E3 that year under the codename Dolphin. During that time, the original PlayStation was leaps and bounds more powerful than Nintendo's flagship console, also known as the N64. Some of you may have heard it before. However, by that time, Project Dolphin, which would later be officially named the Nintendo GameCube, released. Sony had launched the PlayStation 2, and Microsoft with its first console, the Xbox. There's a lot more to get into involving the GameCube's launch, but to sum it up quickly, it didn't sell well. It actually did slightly worse than the Xbox, which was literally Microsoft's first console, and was nowhere near PlayStation 2 sales. So now you're probably thinking, Mochi, what does any of this have to do with Custom Robo? And I'm getting there, I promise, just bear with me. There were two reasons the GameCube didn't sell well. One of them being that the new mini disc player format couldn't play DVDs unlike the PS2 and Xbox. Granted, the Xbox needed an add-on to play DVDs, but because Nintendo couldn't come out with a fix for it, like Microsoft did, they had to focus on their other problem. The GameCube suffered from a similar issue that it still faces today. Their flagship console just doesn't have as many games as its competitors. I mean, in all honesty, most people only play Nintendo consoles for its extensive catalog of Super Mario characters doing any and everything under the sun. So how does Custom Robo come in to save the day? Well, if you're like me and not a resident of Japan, your first introduction to the Custom Robo series was in 2004 when Battle Revolution released in March of that year. But that wasn't the first, or surprisingly last, release of the series. See, Custom Robo actually had 3 prior releases in Japan before it ever made it across waters. Why, you ask? Because they thought that the game was too Japanese and that America wasn't into the whole robot building thing in 1999. Custom Robo V2, and Custom Robo GX all had releases in Japan prior to the one we're here for today. So what made Nintendo throw a shot in the dark and release its new hot 2004 game in North America on the GameCube?
Money!
But yeah, it basically seems like Nintendo was doing any and everything they could to get non-related Mario games out on the global market to compete with the other two powerhouses at that time. And well, it kinda worked. Kinda. Custom Robo Battle Revolution, or just Custom Robo in the West, sold over 400,000 copies globally, but had many mixed reviews on both sides of the planet. But now that we're here in the year 2024, looking back on a game that holds a special place in my inner child's heart, was this game actually as great as I remembered? Or is it just nostalgia that I'm feeling? Well, I took it upon myself to replay the cult classic, and here's my opinions. So, what even is Custom Robo? Well, I can't speak much on the previous games, but Battle Revolution follows you, the main character, whose father mysteriously left the house for milk and never came back, leaving you with a watch you're never allowed to take off, and his final wish for you to become a battle commander. See, in this world, pretty much everything revolves around, you guessed it, robos. More specifically, robots with guns. And any and every conflict is resolved with said robots. Burglars try to invade a lab? Robots. Wife accuses you of cheating? Robots. Girl can't decide which dude she wants to be with, so she invites both of you to have a threesome at the public park? Yeah, robots. Anyway, the main character who's been living off his family inheritance since his father passed away, well, now he needs a job, and he decides to go work as a bounty hunter. So he joins a ragtag group of muscle for hire called the Stale Horse. Alright, that was way funnier in my head. The Steel Hearts. He joins the Steel Hearts, who are pretty much the worst of the worst. Only problem is, he doesn't have a robo. So you tag along with one of their members, Harry, to watch him fight off burglars at a custom robo research lab, until you realize he doesn't do much fighting off and the police, who are arguably worse than him. So you find a magic cube, which is also what the burglars came looking for in the first place, press the button, and boom. You are now the commander of your own custom robo. You then have to fight off each burglar because for some reason you're automatically more capable than most of the police officers who trained years and couldn't pull it off. And now you're officially a member of the Stale Horse. Okay, I won't make the joke again, I promise. Wake up in the morning, or have someone wake you up in the morning, go to work, fight bad guys, go to sleep, have somebody wake you up in the morning again, rinse, repeat, and that's pretty much the first, I would say, third of the story. Now, before I say what this game does well, I feel like I should talk about the things it does poorly first. First off, I know it's common for games of this era, especially ones that find their way being sold globally, to not have voice acting. However, the initial charm of the little voice beeping sound on the screen text being whatever, it starts to wear off. Especially when there's so much dialogue in this game, even outside of the tutorial stages of the game, where everything has an explanation. And I mean, everything has an explanation. The characters just love talking in this game. Even during the end game, every couple steps you take feel like either a fight is about to happen, or at least 5 more minutes of dialogue ensues. If anybody's played this game before, you remember the maze part towards the end of the game, and it's literally fighting and dialogue for like an hour, it feels like. I mean, it gets so bad to the point where the game has to save in the middle of a conversation twice. Not one time, I don't even know why it would be one time. You literally have to save the game twice because it goes on for that long. So my recommendation is, if you replay this game or play it for the first time, go to the settings and change the text speed to the fastest setting immediately. Now, with that being said, the dialogue does tend to drag often, but I also enjoyed a lot of it. One thing about older games that I just love is, no matter how serious the subject matter is, the game never takes itself too seriously. And it's almost like the fourth wall is being broken constantly, and I'm completely here for it. Nowadays, new games love creating environments where the player is completely immersed in the world, and while I do appreciate the former, it's also a nice change of pace to see games where fun is in the forefront. Which is why I think Helldivers 2 is doing so well right now, but maybe that's another video. Harry and Marcia, who will be with you throughout the game, add a lot of funny dialogue. Harry is constantly trying to do his best Duke Dennis impression, which basically just ends up with him begging for a girl's number instead. Side note, this is a spoiler by the way, so skip it if you haven't played the game before, but the world they live in is basically like a shell of his former self, right? So they live in this dome where there's only like 10 places for people to really be at. So that means at some point, don't the people end up with like sleeping with their cousins and shit? Never mind, whatever. Marcia also has some crazy ability to look into the minds of dead battle commanders, but she's also kind of an airhead, so that's pretty funny. Also, she's on the search for her long lost brother, who she eventually runs into. But another side note, right? Again, small dome, world, whatever, not a lot of places to hide, yada yada yada. How do you lose your blue-haired brother in a town the size of like a large parking lot? You know what? Never mind. I'm just gonna move on. The combat in this game is honestly ahead of its time in some ways. For one, what would a game called Custom Robos be without customizing a Robo? And boy, would all the sweaty Warzone streamers love this game. You had hundreds of different combinations to create your own meta build before TikTok and streamers basically forced everybody to use the same 3 loadouts. See, each Robo consisted of the body, gun, bomb, pod, and legs. Each had their own equally important function, and they all had a plethora of options to choose from. For example, the body was basically the Robo itself. There's multiple categories of Robos, and then even styles within those categories. So for the sake of time, I won't go over them, but you have all the basics covered. Defensive types, offensive types, speed types, air types, balance types, etc. And within those groups are different models, and within those models they have an armor and speed category, which further modifies each model. Sounds complicated, but even I understood it as a child to some degree. Each battle takes place in an arena, also known as a Coliseum. Every Robo comes with a basic Coliseum, but some battle commanders, aka the people that have the ability to control their own custom Robo, can also have the ability to create their own Coliseum, which adds some dynamic to the game. For the most part, most of the Coliseums are kind of the same, but it does add some variation to the battles, at least a change of scenery. But there were a few standout Coliseums that definitely did feel different compared to the other ones. But for a game that is 20 years old now, we'll let it slide for the most part. There was also holodecks that can create their own custom Coliseums, but they were kind of few and far in between, mostly found during like tournaments and the training center. Like I said earlier, there's endless amounts of combinations at your disposal in this game, and I've seen people get fairly creative with their builds, but the combat as a whole was solid. The Coliseums are a good size to avoid slow gameplay, and a mixture of destructible and indestructible walls adds some sense of variation and depth to the battles. It also helps certain weapons become more viable than others depending on the circumstance. Certain weapons have the ability to shoot over cover, as well as bombs that chase after your opponent so they can't sit behind cover the whole battle. You also have bombs that can launch you into the air, as well as robos that can jump and air dash to get around obstacles, over obstacles. While I do give credit to the combat of this game, being that its 20th birthday was just a few weeks ago as I'm making this video, there was also some redundancy that I have to mention for the sake of the video. Also, a lot of enemies, especially in early to mid game, can easily be dealt with just by jumping and overloading them with attacks. However, late to mid game, combat does up the difficulty significantly, with a few outliers in between. Another point to mention about combat is there's a lot of it. Hopefully you do enjoy the battles in this game, because you can't go 2 in-game days without running into some drawn out tournament. Of course, I'm being nitpicky since that's literally what this game is about, but it also feels like a lot of the tournaments and combat were just thrown in as filler content. The story. I covered the majority of the story earlier, and I'm assuming most of the people watching this played the game before, so I won't spoil much of the endgame here for those that haven't, but the story was enjoyable. I'm a sucker for conspiracy theories, and the idea that the world government is behind a bunch of shady bullshit, well, it hits the mark for me. I remember playing this game as a kid and seeing the whole story take a plot turn, and I was like blown away, like my little brain was on like max overload. One thing I can say about the story is that it surprisingly covered all of its ends, better than many modern games do today. There wasn't really anything that stood out as like a plot hole to me, and the final boss was definitely more challenging than I expected given the game's age. But I do wish they made the ending cutscene from the last battle feel a little more meaningful. Conclusion. In the end, was Custom Robo really a good game, or was my old man nostalgia kicking in? I'd have to say, yeah. I still love this game, and even found a newer appreciation for it now. This was probably my first RPG game I had ever played at that point, and the quote-unquote open world aspect was my first as well, I believe. If you've never played Custom Robo before, I would highly suggest giving it a try. If you still have a GameCube, good luck finding a copy of this game at a decent price. There's also other ways to play this game that don't require a disc or GameCube, but you can find out pretty easily with a quick search, or you could just message me. If you have played the game before and it's been a while, I'd say it's worth playing again. If you've made it this far, first and foremost, thank you for taking a trip down memory lane with me. I'm 100% down to talk about the game or the video as a whole in the comment section. Also, don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. It took me a good amount of time to make this video. I haven't done like a full form, long form YouTube video in like 3 or 4 years, so it definitely took a while to get back to the swing of things. I have another video like this planned, so subscribe to see the next one. And if you have any other game suggestions, anything that you played that was underrated, maybe I haven't played it before, we could talk about it if I have played it before. And who knows, it could be the next video I do. But yeah, if you have any suggestions, let me know, and peace.